Hello, guys, and welcome back to As a Sports. And today I'm going to be previewing and giving my predictions ahead of this round two and seeing how we're going to go. Um, there's an exceptional round in round one, so very interested to see how we go in round two. So, again, just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe if you like my videos and if you like my content in general. Um, and yeah, make sure to hit your notification bell too, so you stay up to date with when I post. And yeah, cheers guys for listening in, and let's get into it. So yeah, I had a pretty disappointing round last week. I had a um, I got 4 out of 8, so I didn't do too well, but I didn't do badly. Um, Margins at 15, so that's not ideal, but yeah, it wasn't upset that Panthers Broncos games. There were quite a few last week, so but yeah, this is a very difficult season to call by the looks of it, just from looking at round one. But we'll see how we go in round two. So the first game we've got is the Panthers taking on the Rabbitohs. Um, well, I've already selected this game off camera, so I've gone for the Panthers. But yeah, this game is very hard to call. Um, the Panthers have the better history, although I'm not too fussed on bringing the history into it. But I will have a look at their teams here. So not too much has changed for the Panthers. Scott Sorensen's out. And I think Matt Eisenhuth has come onto the bench for um Scott Sorensen, but the rest of their team's pretty unchanged. Um, so yeah, it's a again, it's still a very solid side. I mean, they did struggle a bit in round one, and they did look a bit off, but they will get better in time. But yeah, it's going to be a very difficult week and game to call this, because this is going to be a very good game to end with the Panthers side, who's under a little bit of pressure. I wouldn't say they're under a lot of pressure, but they are under a little bit of pressure because they've lost two straight games now in on their home soil, which is not ideal and hasn't happened for quite a while. Although one of them was the World Club Challenge, so I wouldn't necessarily count that as a big loss. But again, both their losses have only been by 1 point, so it still shows that they, even in games where they haven't been that great, 1 point off. So I wouldn't say it's too bad of panic stations there for the Panthers, but yeah, they're pretty relatively unchanged, which is good to see. And for the Rabbitohs, Jai Arrow and Tavita Tatala are out. They're actually two relatively big losses. Latrell's been named, although I'm not 100% sure if he's going to play. But I mean, if he doesn't play, I guess Alex Johnston goes to fullback, and they'll probably bring. Yeah. So, where are we? So yeah, Cheekham's coming for Jai Arrow, and Daniel Saluka Fafita replaces Tavita Totola there. And I think Jed Cartwright comes onto the bench. But yeah, I guess if Latrell is out, Tane will come into the squad. He'll go to wing, and Alex Johnston will go to fullback, is what I'm guessing would happen if Latrell was all of a sudden not to be able to play. But if Latrell isn't to play, that's quite a big blow, because if you're the Bunnies, I would say this is probably the best time to get Penrith, because they are looking very clunky last week, and I wouldn't say there's a lot of cracks appearing, as what Latrell Mitchell was saying, but he's I actually like that, because he's actually getting into their heads a little bit. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't say there's a lot of cracks there. Like, they do look not as great as last year, but it's very difficult to stay that good for that long. So yeah, it's going to take them a little bit of time, but I still think if you look at this Penrith squad on paper, it looks way too strong compared to that uh, Rabbitohs squad. But the Rabbitohs were really good last weekend, so that's why this game is really difficult to call. Um, I think the biggest mistake Penrith made last week is they left Mitch Kenny on for way too long, and Sonny Luke, he needs to be on for a lot longer because when he was on the field, everyone could tell that he made an impact straight away. Whereas for the Bunnies, my biggest concern for the Bunnies is their bench looks a bit weak. Oh, also, I didn't even consider. Yeah, they've also got Blake Taff on the bench. So I guess if Latrell's out, Blake Taff will just go on at into fullback, and they'll bring probably Tane Milne or maybe Peter Mamazilos or however you say his name onto the bench. But yeah, I mean it is still a very decent Rabbitoh squad. But yeah, they were very good in round one. They looked very good, especially Lachlan Ilias. Very interesting to see if he can repeat his round one performance. But yeah, I reckon the Bunnies need him to fire again if they're to beat this Panthers side. Um, I don't know. I mean, it's at Penrith Stadium again, so this is the third straight game at home for Penrith. They are favourites. I mean, I can understand why. Um, I'm just going to stick with my gut instinct, and I'm just going to go for Penrith. It's going to be an extremely tight game again. It's going to be very good to watch. I think Penrith will get the job done by. It'll be 1-12. Definitely. I don't think it's going to be an absolute blowout. But yeah, it's going to be a very close game. Like I think most of these games this round will be too. Um, Now the next game, we've got the Parramatta Eels taking on the Cronulla Sharks. Oh, this game again, it's so tough to call. Um, so we'll just have a look. So here's the match center. So Parramatta are relatively unchanged. The only change they've made is Isaac Lume's out and Sean Russell has come back into the squad. Um, yeah, Sean Russell was good for them last year when he was there. He had that injury last year, which ruled him out for the whole year. But in that game where he played, I'm pretty sure he scored a hat trick or something. So he's no slouch of a winger. This is a very tough game to call because both of these sides are relatively strong. Um, Although, again, I am still kind of worried about that Parramatta bench. Um, but yeah, again, the biggest thing still for me is no Nico Hines, which last week the Sharks did play good against the Rabbitohs and they did challenge them. But the biggest thing for me was they lacked that control around the field. And that's what Nico Hines was so great at last year. And don't get me wrong, I did say it last week too. Braden Trindle is a handy player, and he definitely isn't a bad player. He'll still get the job done for you. But I just don't think that obviously he's not quite as quality as Nico Hines, so they need him back pretty quickly, the Sharkies. But apart from that, Jack Williams and Wade Graham are out. Wade Graham got that suspension for that hit on Davey Moale, and Jack Williams, I think he got an injury of some sort. Can't remember what. So for that, Royce Hunt and Oregon Kafusi come in. And yeah, other than that, they're relatively unchanged. And yeah, I mean, this game's very tough to call. Again, this could be a very 50-50 game, just like the previous game. I'm gonna go with Parramatta, just because simply, again, they're at Combank Stadium. Um, it's they seem to play a lot better up there. I mean, they did get unlucky last week. They definitely should have won last week against Melbourne, but they just threw the game. In unfortunate circumstances where they knocked the ball on after they had a 7 tackle set at the end of the game in the Golden Point. But yeah, they should have won that one. But yeah, I think at Combank they've got the big home advantage. It's going to be Mitch Moses' 200th game, so I think for that occasion the whole team's going to lift, and I think he's probably going to have a good game, especially because he's had a lot of pressure on him this week with his whole contract negotiation stuff and questions about him being greedy and whatnot. So I think the whole squad's going to lift up around him, and I think they're going to get the job done for him against this quality Sharks team as well. So yeah, I'm going to pick Parramatta. I think they'll get the job done by 6, but it's definitely going to be a very close game. I don't think um, it's going to be an absolute blowout of a game, this one either. Again, this is a very 50-50 game. I can easily see the Sharks winning this game too. But I'm going to stick with my gut and go with Parramatta. The next game we've got here, the Queensland Derby on the Friday night game. We got the Broncos taking on the Cowboys. Oh, this game is so tough to call. Every single time I see this game, I'm very reluctant to tip one because it's very hard to call. Okay, so both sides are relative. So for the Broncos first, so Reece Walsh is back into the squad, and Selwyn has gone back to the bench, and Jesse Arthurs has gone back to the reserves. But other than that, they are relatively unchanged, with no real changes there. And the Cowboys are unchanged; they have no changes at all. So yeah, that's good to see there. Oh, this is an extremely tough game. Um, I mean, the Broncos beat the Premiers in round one. That was the first upset of the weekend. Um, the Broncos were very good defensively, um, and they got the job done in the attack with Adam Reynolds leading the way. Like, he has to be, if the Broncos to win this game, Adam Reynolds is going to have to win it for them because Reece Walsh, yes, he was good in the trials, but he hasn't played for the last 2 weeks, so he's going to be a bit rusty coming back. Farnworth was exceptional last week. Cobbo was a bit average at fullback, but going back to the wing will help him a lot, and will help the Broncos in general, I think. Their forward pack was excellent last week. They're unchanged. Their bench was pretty good too last week. They're unchanged as well. And for the Cowboys, they're unchanged. They were pretty good themselves last week. They got out to that amazing start. It was 18-6 at the break, but then all of a sudden the Raiders just came back, and I was a little bit concerned with how they were leading 18-6, but they only won by 1 point in the end, 19-18. I mean, I wouldn't be overly concerned because they still found a way to win that game, even though they were the better team for majority of the game. But yeah, this is going to be an absolute cracker of a game. It always is. It's so tough to call. I think I rate this Cowboys pack a slight bit higher than the Broncos pack. I just think I still not a big fan of Billy Walters at number 9. I think Reece Robson, we can see he's way quality over Billy Walters, no doubt about that. So that's the only reason I think their pack is just slightly better than the Broncos pack. Cowboys did beat the Broncos twice last year, and pretty convincingly in both of them. But yeah, this is going to be a very interesting game. Oh, it's at Suncorp. The Broncos did look good against the Premiers. The Cowboys looked very good to start, and then they kind of fell off, but they got the job done. This is very hard to choose, but I'm gonna go with. Oh, it's very tough. I'm gonna go with the Broncos just simply because they're at home. They beat the Premiers, which is saying a lot, even though the Premiers weren't necessarily that great. Whereas the Cowboys, I'm just a little concerned that they sort of faded in that game, considering they had a lot of the momentum and how the Raiders fought back. But again, these first three games are very hard to tip. These three games could literally go either way, and it's very tough to call. But yeah, I'm going to back the Broncos in this one. I think they'll get the job done. Obviously, I'm going to say 1-12 because these games are always pretty much 1-12. I'm just very keen to see how Reece Walsh goes in his first game um, at the club in NRL season. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this game goes. But the Broncos get the job done. But it's going to be very close. Next game, we have the Roosters and the Warriors. Now two different sides from last week. So the Warriors actually impressed me with the way they were able to defend and hang on. And the Roosters kind of disappointed me with how they looked last week. I mean, their middles got absolutely dominated by the Dolphins, and they made too many errors in when they were attacking. And they kind of just got out enthused last week, which is not a great sign. But the Roosters, I think, will be fine. But first off, we're going to check the teams out, make sure to see what the team's looking like. So Matt Lodge is out for the Roosters, and Fletcher Baker comes on to start. And Trell May comes onto the bench, and the Warriors are unchanged from their winning side last week. I've got to say, CNK last week, he was unbelievable for the Warriors. I can already see the massive change he's put onto the Warriors. And Joseph Manu actually is back as well for the Roosters. And yeah, that's a big in too. Yeah, so yeah, Joseph Manu being back is a massive help to the Roosters because I could kind of tell too that they were missing his spark in attack as well. But yeah, I mean the Roosters were very disappointing, but it's going to be interesting to see if they can turn around this week. But I'm pretty sure they will. I mean they're back at home at Allianz. The Warriors are coming across. The Warriors did impress me, as I mentioned before. Like Nicole CNK, he was excellent. Sean Johnson played quite well. Their forwards were excellent. And their bench was pretty decent too. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be tough this game, but for the Warriors. But I am going to stick with the Roosters. I just think the Roosters, I think they're just going to be bolstered by Joseph Manu coming back, and I think he's going to spark the team a bit. But in saying that, I think this game's going to be a lot closer than most people think. I don't think this is going to be an absolute blowout by the Roosters because the Warriors did look good last week, and I liked what CNK and even Tamari Martin and some of their other forwards like Jackson Ford and Mitch Barnett brought to them. So I'm going to pick the Roosters, and I'm going to go 1-12. I think this is going to be a lot closer than most people think. But yeah, I'm going to back the Roosters in this one. The next one, we have got the Dolphins and the Raiders at the Dolphins' home ground, playing at KO Stadium in Redcliffe. So they are playing in Redcliffe. So they're going to be taking on the Raiders, as I mentioned before. God, I just still cannot believe the Dolphins and that performance on the weekend. I just still can't believe it, but it's great to see for the NRL in general and also great for the Dolphins and all their players. So let's go through their team first. So Ray Stone is out for this week. He got a knee injury. And Mason Teague comes onto the bench for him. But other than that, their team is unchanged. And again, Felice Kafusi's in there. Great to see. I think this should be a very interesting game through the middle because both of these teams' packs look pretty good. You got Joseph Tarpany, Hudson Young, Elliot Whitehead, and Corey Hayward-Naera up against Jesse Bromwich, Jared Wallace, Felice Kafusi, Kenny Bromwich, and Tom Gilbert, and Pasami Solo, sorry. And you got Danny Levi up against Jeremy Marshall King, which I think Jeremy Marshall King is the better dummy half out of those two at the moment. And he's a very good player. I did say, though, before that as leaving the Bulldogs, he was finding his feet and finally finding some form, and he's now found it at the Dolphins. He looked really good in that game. He was unbelievable. Mark Nichols was good as always, the GOAT. He got a little meat pie in there, or a try, sorry, if you're not sure what NRL is. But yeah, I was very impressed with the Dolphins. But again, the biggest thing for me, and I think what most people think, is can they back it up? Like, are they going to be able to do it again? Or was that because they're a new club? They had the hype, the stadium was filled out, which no doubt it will be again this weekend, but can they still replicate that? I think Wayne Bennett will be able to get them back up for it again, but we'll see how they go. Now, on to the Raiders, who, I mean, I was impressed with their effort because I thought last week that they're going to get absolutely annihilated by the Cowboys, which is what it was looking like, but they managed to hang in there and they managed to make it a 1-point game, which was an exceptional effort. But looking at their team, so Jordan Rapin is out and Albert Hopuarte comes in. And their bench is unchanged. And the rest of their squad also is unchanged. Very, very interesting team still. I mean, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Sebastian Chris at fullback still, but he did get his HIA last week, which is the whole drama the NRL has been going on this week about the whole HIA and independent doctors, which I'm not going to get into in this video, but maybe in a future video I might maybe discuss it. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure about that yet, but yeah, I mean, the Raiders squad, again, it's not really a massively impressive squad. They've got they've got quality players sprinkled in there, but yeah, the Raiders squad just doesn't really excite me, to be honest. I mean, it was good to see them fight back, but it just kind of seems like they rely a little bit too much on Jack White and Joseph Tarpany and Elliot Whitehead and guys like that to get the job done for them. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of a little bit of a tough game to call because obviously a lot of people are going for the Dolphins here with 65% because of what they did on the weekend, which again was great. They are at home again. They're going to have the massive hyped up crowd behind them and they're going to be very excited. And there's no doubt that most likely the first 10, 15 minutes, they're going to come out firing. So the Raiders have to be ready for that. But if the Raiders can sort of withstand that like first 15, 20 minutes, then I think this is going to be a pretty close game. But if not, then this may be a blowout game because the Raiders defensively were pretty average last week to start with. But then as the game went on, they got better. But this is a very tough game to call because the Raiders, normally they're not too bad defensively, but last week they sort of had a little bit of an off half, whereas the Dolphins were very good defensively. Although they both conceded the same amount of points last week in 18, but the Dolphins looked very good around the attack, and I think Jeremy Marshall King is absolutely going to tear the Raiders pack open again. So I think I'm going to go with the Dolphins here. And I'm actually going to go a bit of off on a limb here. And I'm going to say the Dolphins are going to win 13 plus. I think they're going to be just as hyped as they were last week. And I think they're going to get the job done. And I think they're going to put a bit of a score on the Raiders. I do. But again, the Raiders, again, this is another tough game to call because the Raiders can also just come out with the same way they finished off last week and come out and put a score on the Dolphins too. But I'm going to back the Dolphins in and let's see how it goes. This one, next game, we got the Storm taking on the Bulldogs. Uh, Two teams who played very differently last week. I mean, the Bulldogs were quite disappointing while Melbourne did what Melbourne do and just got the job done against a quality side in Parramatta. Yeah, so the biggest news, obviously, in this game is Cameron Munster's out with his finger injury. So Tyron Wishart replaces him off the bench. And Bronson Garlick, or is it Jordan Grant? One of those two comes on to the bench. And the Bulldogs side is unchanged, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Bulldogs side's unchanged. This is going to be a very interesting game because I know me personally straight away looking at this game, I went, yep, Storm win this easy. Which, I mean, I would say that, but Cameron Munster was a big reason they won last week. If Cameron Munster didn't come out in that second half, I don't think they would have beaten Parramatta. I really don't. And when Cameron Munster came on, the Storm looked a lot better. And that's no knock on Jerome Hughes or Harry Grant. Harry Grant had an exceptional game. Jerome Hughes had a pretty good game too. Nick Meaney was also pretty good. Their forwards were pretty decent too. Josh King surprised me. He went pretty well. I thought he was going to be pretty quiet, but he actually shocked me. He was quite good actually for the Storm. Yeah, they are back at Amy Park, so that's definitely going to suit them. Yeah, I mean, I think Melbourne will still be okay in this game, but it's going to be very interesting to see how they play without Cameron Munster. But I still think they can get this job done against the Doggies. But talking about the Doggies, yeah, so their team's unchanged. Matt Burton, Kyle Flanagan is still in the halves there. Jacob Carraz, well, it looks like he's playing, but I'm not sure if he's allowed to play with all those concussion rules going on or what's happening with that. But he's been named, so looks like he'll be playing. Reed Marnie's still at number 9. Kick out for Taylor Mariner, second row, and for Manu Brown's in the lock. And their bench is unchanged from last weekend. Yeah, so I mean, as I've mentioned quite a few times on this channel, the Doggies are definitely the overhyped team of 2023. I think they've got a good team. They're building a good team. They've got a good team coming here, but I'm just still not quite sold on this team yet. I like the look of it, but it's going to take it some time to play to it, the potential that it has. But it's going to take some time, and coming up against Melbourne's going to be pretty tough for them. Like they've had a pretty tough opening to the draw. They've got a Manly, who Manly have a lot of quality players, and now they're coming up against Melbourne in Melbourne, which is always a tough game. But I mean, in saying that, they will improve in this game. But the biggest thing for me last week for them, which I said in my review, which I released a couple of days ago, which I'll link in the description, like the only thing that really cost them in that game was just mainly their errors. Like 2 or 3 of Manly's tries came off the Bulldogs' error, or them giving away a stupid penalty. So it could have been a very different game in round 1 if they didn't do that. Just kept their discipline in check. But yeah, I mean, but other than that, they still did get beaten quite easily in the forwards. So that's my biggest worry for the Doggies. The Doggies will definitely respond, especially against this weakened Melbourne pack. But the Melbourne pack is still pretty decent. But yeah, I think Melbourne are just going to be a little bit too strong for the Doggies. But in saying that, it's definitely going to be a lot closer than most people think. I think this is going to be a pretty close game. I'm going to go. Uh, I'm going to go. Yeah, I'm going to go the Storm 13 plus. I think they'll win by maybe like 16 or so. Like it's not going to be. So I think this is going to be a very close game though. But I think Melbourne will just run away with it at the end of the game. So yeah, 13 plus for Melbourne, with it being pretty close for most of the game, and then the Storm will just run away with it. I think because they just have a little bit too strong of a team at the moment for the Doggies. But yeah, oh yeah, sorry about the microphone disappearing, guys. I'll just let you in. So the microphone's just disappeared now because I was just having some audio issues. So just have to bear with me for using my computer audio. So in advance, I am sorry if my audio is not that great, but my microphone is having some issues, so I'll have to fix that up. But anyway, getting back to the video. Um, so Tigers are taking on the Knights on Sunday. This is actually going to be a pretty good game because both teams lost in round one. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a very interesting game because both teams sort of had similar issues in a sense. So for the Tigers, so Fanua Pole is out and um, Alex Seyfarth has come onto the bench, whereas the Knights have lost Adam Elliott due to, I'm pretty sure he got suspended for that tackle off the ball against the Warriors. And Jack Johns comes into the team. But other than that, the Knights are also mostly unchanged. So the Tigers last week, well, they played my boys, the Titans. They they showed good signs attacking wise. Defensively, they were a little bit concerning because they kind of some of the tries they let in were kind of soft. Um, like that one off the kick to Sam McIntyre, like they should have diffused that kick. The one to AJ Brimson, the marker was a bit slow coming across. Um, but yeah, the Tigers, I don't know, like again, they just need to figure out what style of attack they want to play with. Um, like last week, they kind of didn't really know what style they wanted to do. Like when they were throwing the ball around, offloading and expansive play, they looked very dangerous. Um, and that's the way I think they should play. Um, but in the second half, they went back to a sort of structured play, and they didn't really offload that much. And that's when they got both their tries. But yeah, they didn't really know which way they wanted to play. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting game, this one, with David Clemmer playing against his old club, the Knights, and Jackson Hastings playing against his club, which he was at for 12 months, the Tigers. But yeah, this is going to be a very interesting game. I think the Tigers just. Oh, this is very tough for me because it is again played at Leichhardt this week. The Tigers did show good signs. Defensively, they weren't necessarily that great. Their forwards were fine last week. Well, they could have been better to provide more um, service to Api Coruscant. Um, but again, I was very shocked that they left him again for when they brought him on so late. By the time they brought him on, the Titans, we were already doing quite well in the game, and we were basically ready for him. Um, but I mean, Jake Simpkin did a decent start of the game for them. And yeah, their forwards are fine. Their forwards are good enough in this team. It's just their outside backs which I'm concerned about because their outside backs aren't necessarily the best, and they're the ones that struggled to get the points last week. So the only two players that got their points were Dane Laurie and Adam Dewey. They're spine players, which are fine, but their outside backs just I'm just not sold on them being that great. So, it's just so tough to call. And again, the Knights, they were pretty disappointing last week. They showed some good signs. Caleb Ponga had some decent touches at 5'8". Jackson Hastings was pretty steady there for them. Their forwards were a little bit disappointing. Um, but I mean, I think they'll be a little bit better this week. Lockie Miller was okay. He had okay moments, but I mean, he was pretty solid at the back. He didn't make too many bad things, but um, it's going to be very interesting to see how they go in this one. But again, this is an extremely tough game to call. Um, I'm just going to go for the Tigers just for the fact that they're at home. But again, the Knights could very easily win this game too. But I'm going to go the Tigers, get the job done 1-12. It's going to be very close, but it should be a great Sunday game down there at Leichhardt. Yeah. On to the next game. My boys, the Titans, taking on the Dragons. So obviously this is the Dragons' first game of the season after they had the bye in round one. So for some reason they are actually favourites in this game, which is a bit of a surprise to me. But yeah, so they've got Sloan at fullback. So I'll go through their full team because it's the first time they're in this but it's relatively unchanged to what their team would be normally. So we've got Sloan at fullback, Fina and Ravalawa on the wings, Moses Sully and Zach Lomax in the centres, Jaden Sullivan and Ben Hunt in the halves, Molo and Laurie in the front row with Moses Mbai at number 9. Okay, that's an interesting decision. With Ben Murdoch, Masilla, and Jaden Sewer on the edge, and Jack Bird at lock. And their bench is Jacob Little, Zane Musgrove, Toby Couchman, and Michael Molo. And Josh Kerr's their replacement. I mean, there's enough decent sort of players in this Dragons team, but again, like I said, I'm not really sold on this Dragons team. I'm really not. Their front row, it's okay, but it's nothing exceptional. But yeah, it's not a team I'm massively sold on, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how they go in their round one clash. After all the dramas that happened and the way they've been in the trials, which has been pretty ordinary. So it's going to be very interesting, this one. And for us, we are unchanged. So we've got AJ Brimson at the back, the Brimdog Millionaire. He was exceptional in round one. Khan Pereira, who he had a bit of a quiet debut, but trust me, he'll come into his own eventually. He was pretty solid. And then we had Aaron Shop, who was exceptional in defence in the centres with Philip Sammy, who got a double last week. Exceptional. Then we have Joseph Fafita on a wing, who he was pretty solid himself. And then Kieran Foran's been named despite the injury he got on the weekend. Very interesting to see, but I'm pretty sure he did, after he got the injury, he still was playing. So for that fact, I'm going to have to assume he'll be okay, and I think he will play. But once I've gone through the full team, I'll go through what I actually think will happen if he does happen to not be able to play this game. So then, yeah, he'll be partnered by Tanner in the halves. Jolliffe and Tino still in the front row. Good pairing in the front row there. Verrills is still at number 9. He was excellent in round 1 too. He was pretty good. Dave Fafita, the man who had an exceptional round 1. Yeah, and great news also that he's re-signed with us for a further 3 years. Absolutely great news. So yeah, I reckon I have a big game this week again. He was exceptional last week. Then we got Joe Stimson, who also stood up and played very well, played very steady, considering we lost Bo Firma. To the ACL, he was exceptional. Isaac Liu looked pretty good in this game. It looks like he's playing a lot better in this team, whereas last year he sort of struggled a little bit. But yeah, he looked pretty good in this side. He looked fine on the weekend. And then we have JC, Jaden Campbell on the bench with Mo, who had an exceptional game off the bench last week, with Aaron Clark and Sam McIntyre, who also had a pretty good game, with Chris Ramley in the placement, and Tremaine Spry, Cleese Haas, Keanu Kinney, and Toby Sexton on the reserves. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with our team. Like, I was very impressed by last week. I loved our defense and what we saw there. I believe we will get better defensively this year. I really do. And it's going to be very interesting to see how we go. But I have faith in this team. I really do. And I see a lot of good things for us this year, especially defensively on the edge. Like Aaron Schropp, he was outstanding. Some of those tackles on Isaiah Papali'i last week, and Isaiah Papali'i is very hard to tackle. Some of those tackles on him last week were absolutely outstanding. Even Jojo Fafita made some massive tackles on some of their big boppers. Was outstanding. Kieran Foran for Fafita was outstanding. That little short ball which got him into the hole, outstanding. But yeah, I'm really happy with our whole team here. Now, so if Kieran Foran's out, I think one of two things will happen for us. So if Kieran Foran's out, I believe Brimson will stay at fullback, and JC will come off the bench, and he'll play at 6 with Tanner, and Verrills will stay at number 9, obviously. And then I think Chris Randall will most likely be brought on as a number 14. Or it may even be Toby Sexton gets brought on a number 14, one of those two. And then, or the second thing that may happen is obviously Brimson stays at fullback, and Toby Sexton comes on to play 6 with Tanner Boyd, and JC stays on at 14. It's either one of those two, because I don't necessarily think you'd want to move Brimson, who had an exceptional game at fullback, out of there. So yeah, and obviously JC did play at 5'8" last week when Kieran went off. So yeah, either one of those two. So either either JC comes into 5'8" and Randall comes onto the bench, or JC goes into 5'8" and or Toby Sexton comes into 5'8" and the rest of his team stays unchanged. But apart from that, I'm very happy with this squad. I'm gonna go again. I'm gonna say we're gonna win this one. We have a pretty good record against the Dragons. I mean, they've been pretty disappointing in the trials, which is all we have to go off for them. Their side doesn't look that impressive, whereas ours looks a lot more threatening, and our defense was very good. In our last 2 games, obviously, if you include the last trial and in our round 1 game against the Tigers, our defense was very good, and I was very, very proud of our defensive effort. So yeah, I'm going to go Titans 13 plus. I think I went Titans 13 plus last week, and I was only 1 point off, so I'm going to back us in again, 13 plus. I think we'll be too good for the Dragons. So yeah, that's my wrap up of the week. So again, I'll just go through all my predictions here. So I'm going to go Panthers against the Rabbitohs. I'm going to go the Eels against the Sharks, and my margin is going to be by 6 points. I'm going to go the Broncos against the Cowboys, the Roosters against the Warriors, the Dolphins. I put it better. So Panthers to beat the Rabbitohs, Eels to beat the Sharks by 6, Broncos to beat the Cowboys, Roosters to beat the Warriors, the Dolphins to beat the Raiders, the Storm to beat the Bulldogs, Tigers to beat the Knights, and the Titans to beat the Dragons. So that's all my tips for this week. Thank you guys for watching my video. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like this content. And yeah, have a good week tipping, and hope you do well. And yeah, up the Titans. Thank you guys. See you later.